Greetings, dungeon crawlers! My name is Lainey Rose, and I'm the events manager at City Bookshop. I'm thrilled to be joining you all today for this special virtual Q&A to celebrate Matt Dinniman's smash success series, Dungeon Crawler Carl. From the titular book to the latest Eye of the Bedlam Bride, fans everywhere are clamoring for more of Carl and Donut. Before we dive into tonight's event, some housekeeping details. Please put your questions in the Q&A box so that we can see them and can easily ask them. We would love for you to keep the chat box for your general enthusiasm, so tell us where you're tuning in from and what your favorite flavor of donut is. If you put a question in the chat, it is likely going to get lost in the chatter, so please keep the Q&A feature for questions. The recording of this event will be posted on YouTube in the week following the event, so hello to future YouTube viewers. Books purchased with your ticket tonight have been signed and will be shipped out in the week following the event. And if you need to purchase an additional copy of any books mentioned tonight, you can shop on our website, and we do ship anywhere in the country. And now to introduce the man of the hour, Matt Dinniman is a writer, artist, and musician, and from Gig Harbor, Washington. He is the author of several books, including the best-selling Dungeon Crawler Carl series. And I will now step off screen, and we will get this show on the road. So please welcome Matt Dinniman. Yay! Woo!
Wow, this feels like a police interrogation. I have Ferdinand over my shoulder.
So we'll start off with some easy questions, and we'll start off with the question everyone wants to know, which is, what is your inspiration for the series?
My inspiration for Dungeon Crawler Carl. I've been a writer my whole life. I started writing fan fiction when I was a little kid. I wrote G.I. Joe and Transformers fan fiction. My first story I got published in a national magazine was in 1999.
Wow.
First book I ever wrote that got published came out in 2003. So I've been doing this for a really long time. And as a writer that's been writing for a long time, I've always had like this long list of stories I've wanted to tell. And that list now is pages and pages and pages long. And for this particular story, basically death game show story, that all came from originally when I watched The Running Man for the first time. I'm a big fan of that. And then I used to draw pictures of cats and dogs for a living. Before I was made money as an author, my main job was going to Comic Cons and other events selling my pictures of cat art. You could Google Matt Dinniman art right now and you'll still see a ton of my stuff. But in that, I would go to cat shows. And one day I just went to a cat show and I had my booth set up, just an artist alley booth with my art. And they have cages in the cat shows. And in one of the cages, just glaring at me this whole weekend was this tiny little kitten, tortoiseshell Persian cat. And she just wanted to rip my throat out. And she was glaring at me the whole time and not having a good time. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to write a book with that cat in. And
Incredible.
that's how Carl was born.
Incredible. Well, what is your writing process like?
Writing process. I am what's called a pantser. There's plotters and pantsers. Plotters are someone that kind of have the story all planned out in their head. They write an outline and they fill in the outline to make the story. A pantser is someone that just kind of makes it all up as they go along. That's what I am. My process, I don't recommend this to anybody. It's kind of psychotic. I write scenes over and over and over again. And then I find like the most unhinged, too far one, and then take a slight step back usually. And then that's what ends up making it into the story. And I have no idea where I'm going from point A to point B. I am pretty if you look at my manuscripts in progress, they're very unorganized, but usually by the time they get to my Patreon, they're pretty well organized, but it takes a while. The most recent book, This Inevitable Ruin, was 270,000 words, but I wrote almost 800, a little more than 800, I think, 1,000 words for the whole thing. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's insane. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Well, can you talk at all about your journey into traditional publishing?
My journey. Okay.
You can.
So the first few books I published, they were all through smaller presses, but still traditional presses. And then when I decided to write a book ended up being called Dominion of Blades, my first lit RPG novel that came out in 2017. I decided to try self-publishing. I'd been in the publishing community for a while. And when that book came out, it made more money in the first day, honestly, than I had made my entire career up to that point. And even then, it wasn't that much, but I was getting more reads, more people were buying my book than ever before. And I was in control of the whole thing. As a result of that, I kind of immersed myself in the idea of being self-publishing, and that I thought, well, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And I did that for a long time. And then finally, when Carl came out, which the first book came out in October of 2020, and it came out and it did pretty well for what it was. It was just chugging along, kind of similar to my previous books, about what I expected. And then the audiobook came out in January of 2021, and then book two also came out around that time. And it just slowly started to become more and more popular. I started seeing people online saying, hey, I really like this book I just read. And that was really cool to me. And I was very happy with that. And I was like, well, self-publishing is great. It's amazing when you put it all in your own hands. I can write something and get it edited to my liking and put it out there, and I'm in full control. And it was like that for a while. And then a few years ago, I realized that even though my ebooks and my audiobooks are selling really well, I'm not selling physical books at all. And I finally, when I ended up meeting my agent, the man who became my agent, that's what I said. I said, I'd love for the ability to have books in bookstores that people can buy, but I don't want to give up my ebook rights because I'm still a self-publisher at heart as far as that's concerned. And he said, well, that's kind of hard to do, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. So we worked for a really long time, and finally, Jess Wade, who's my editor at Ace Berkeley, she was willing to take a chance on it. So they bought the print only rights. So Dungeon Crawler Carl is traditionally published only in the physical books. And that really worked out pretty well for me, because since then it's just exploded in popularity across between the ebooks, the audiobooks, and the physical books. Throughout the entire 7-book series, we've sold just about 3 million copies since it started. So that's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Has the reality of it sunken in yet, or are you still feeling like this is bananas?
No, it's bananas. I'm in like the back room of a bookstore being interrogated like I'm a murder suspect, and that would never have happened, before. And I'm on a tour right now, and this is day 7 of 9, and each stop has been unique and amazing. And meeting all you guys that are coming to it, it's just absolutely insane.
Well, with so many characters in the Dungeon Crawler Carl universe, what's your approach to getting into the minds and personalities of each one as you're writing? And do you have a personal favorite character?
My approach to writing characters, it remains the same, even if it's a small side character or the main character. When I first think of a character, and I always think of characters first, I think a lot of the writers do that. And it's kind of the secret sauce to the whole thing. The characters are more important than the plot. The characters are more important than the action. Because once you have a character that's fully fleshed out, then all that cool stuff that's built around it really works much, much better when you know the characters really well. So if I come up with a character, even if they have a name, even if they only say one line and we never see them again, I always know 2 things about them. I know what they're afraid of and what they want the most in the world. And when you know that, you know someone pretty well almost right away. And when I have a character that's a little more fleshed out, like Carl and Dono, for example, then I will start to build their backstory right away. And then I know lots and lots of things that happen to them. Sometimes I'll write short stories about them that will never see the light of day. There's a character named Louis. I've written 20,000 words of his backstory, and we may never see all those specifics, but I know it when I'm writing, which makes him, I feel so much more alive on the page. And it's like that with all the characters who are in the main or secondary cast of Carl.
Yeah, and kind of similarly with all of the huge number of abilities and characters and the storyline specifically that you have introduced over the span of 6 books, how do you keep them all so straight and then utilize them brilliantly in all of Carl's crazy plans?
Cocaine. No, just joking. I don't do drugs. I don't do cocaine. I have an Excel sheet that I use. It's really, really big. It's 206 pages long, I believe now. I made a second Excel sheet that keeps track of the first one. I've also hired someone that built me a database in Notion. It's amazing. And I need to train myself to use it better. But again, I'm a pantser. I make everything up as I go along, but I keep very, very careful track of everything that's happened already in the story. And I found that really helps me to know it makes it so I don't have to reread a lot. I actually just did reread the whole thing, just to help me with some stuff in book 8, but I don't need to do that as much. There's also a fan wiki, which I don't look at, but apparently it's getting pretty good. It's like I didn't go to the main page. Last I saw it was over 1,200 pages, which is crazy. Yeah.
Well, those were some pretty like serious shop talk questions. So we do have some fun questions for you. Like, has Donut ever played with a laser pointer?
Has Donut ever played with a laser pointer? I can't imagine someone like Carl wouldn't have a laser pointer. So he probably has played with it a little bit with Donut. She's also a Persian. Persians tend to be a little more chill about that sort of thing, but they love laser pointers as well. So yeah.
Probably. How do you think you would do in a dungeon crawl?
I get this question a lot, and I know I would die almost immediately. I wouldn't be stupid enough to go in unless I absolutely had to. Uh, I I think most people who go to the dungeon, it's a pretty dumb thing to do unless like they're like Carl or they have no other choice. But I I would get killed by rats right when I walk in, probably.
Yeah, that's fair. I think same for myself as well. Um, have you created any other characters that are active in the dungeon that we as readers haven't met yet?
Yes. Um, there are a few. There's one that we've met a little bit. There's his name's Damien. He's a very important character. There's if you read the books, the hardcover books that are through Ace, they have an exclusive story that's in the back. It's called Backstage at the Pineapple Cabaret, and you have to kind of read them in order. And when they're all put together, they end up being like a novella length. Hopefully, we can get that released by itself eventually too. But the characters in that are extremely important to the overall story, and you don't have to read that in order to get the full story. But eventually, probably at the end, we'll learn a little bit more about them and the part they played throughout the story. And that's the whole thing with like the squirrel brain and a story such as this that focused really, really tightly on Carl and Donut in the first few books, and it's been expanding, expanding, expanding. But at the same time, it's still from the first person point of view, in Carl's point of view. So there's lots of things that go on that I know it's happening. I try to keep track of what all the main characters are doing, even if we don't see it on page. And it's a lot, but it's also what's fun for me.
Yeah, that kind of goes into, since you mentioned the Pineapple Cabaret, we had someone ask, how would you describe the Pineapple Cabaret?
Backstage at the Pineapple Cabaret is a short series of stories. Each one is told from the different point of view of a different NPC that's in the dungeon. And that's in the dungeon. We're actually not 100% positive where they actually are by the time we get to the second part. And it is ostensibly the tale of the 17th floor. And the first one in the first book is from Rory the Shamanka's point of view, the goblin with all the piercings in her face. And the second one is from a character you haven't even met, if you haven't read it, called Grandma Llama, who's one of the meth llamas, the bad llamas from the first book as well.
Now if you could pull from any IP of any other fictional world, what fictional character would you like to bring into the series?
Huh. What other fictional character? I'd like to see what Harry Dresden would do in the dungeon. He'd probably like one shot it all if he kept his powers. If you take like the hobbits from Lord of the Rings, they'd get smushed immediately. Um, there's lots of other lit RPG novels. Most of the characters in those are stronger than Carl is. I see a lot of things where like, what if Lyndon from Cradle fought Carl? Carl would get his ass kicked, but in the dungeon, I think they would do pretty well. Um, but I don't know, ET would get smushed right away. Um, Kung Fu Panda would do well.
Yeah. Now, what has been your favorite fan theory that you've seen regarding the Dungeon Crawl universe?
So I try to avoid fan theories because if I see them, I know I know I won't do it. I mean, my favorite fan theory, the cutest one is probably that there's going to be a happy ending, that they're all going to live. That's a joke, maybe. We'll see what happens.
So you had talked earlier about like pantsing and plotting and stuff, but someone had asked, I feel like almost every word is written intentionally, and often small lines are called back to later in the book or even in later books. How do you do that when you are a self-described pantser writer?
It's easy when you're walking backwards. I do that a lot. I call back things all the time. Like I said, I keep very careful track of everything that's behind me. And I paint myself into corners, deliberately paint myself into corners a lot. I write scenes that I have no idea how I'm going to get out of it without being too hokey. And I can usually do that by going back and trolling through all the previous things that I've written, all the things I've set up with no obvious way out, way out of them. And I pull them from my toolbox. I have in one of my Excel sheets, it's called Check Off Guns, and it's all these things Carl has. There's also Toolbox, which is a bunch of items he's collected along the way that I haven't used yet. There's lots of cool things in there. There's a bucket of glitter. There's the B. Arthur condom. There's a cactus. All sorts of things that I may just pull out randomly to get out of a situation, and then suddenly people are like, wow, I can't believe you plotted that meticulously. And it's fun. It's fun for me to do things like that. My ultimate goal, and I don't always succeed, but it's to make people read a scene and be surprised by it, but at the same time think to themselves, I couldn't imagine it having gone any other way.
Okay, so you know that you're going to get a lot of questions about the TV show.
Yes.
What can you tell us, if anything, et cetera, et cetera? You can imagine we've got probably half a dozen questions about the TV show here.
Yeah. So what's out in public is this came out, I believe, in August of last year that NBC Universal purchased, they optioned the right to make Dungeon Crawler Carl into a television series. And with that news, Seth MacFarlane's company, Fuzzy Door, won the right to make the show. They're the ones that would be creating the show. In addition, my friend Chris Yost is attached as the writer for the show. Chris is amazing. He's a comic book author. He's written the last few Thor movies, Mandalorian episode that I really liked. But most importantly to me is Chris is already a fan of the book. He's on my Patreon. He's messages me at 3 a.m. asking about like certain little lore things. So he's in charge of writing the show if we get to that point. We do have more news coming down the pipeline soon, hopefully. It's all good so far, but you never know with this sort of thing. Like I was saying earlier, I have lots of friends who've gone through this process, making the option process for a show, and you never know what's going to happen. It can get canceled at the last second, or we can have a show like Murderbot pop up, which is, I've seen the first 2 episodes. It's one of my favorite books, and the show's great so far. So
do you have any idea of what your input on the production might be?
I don't know yet. Honestly, we haven't gotten to the point where we butt heads about anything, and hopefully with this team, they're pretty I do know that they're very respectful of Princess Donut, which was really important to me. Like, I wouldn't go forward with it if we can't make Donut the central part of the story, just like she is in the book. And that's honestly probably going to be the biggest, most difficult part because, I mean, you can't train cats to do anything.
Yeah.
So why don't you go with it some way or the other?
Do you have a hope if it would be live action or animated, or is that not gonna happen?
It's the production that's being created right now is a live action show.
We had someone say Murder Bot crossover when?
Murderbot would kick ass in the dungeon.
Yeah. Any plans for a video game adaptation?
I don't have any immediate news about a video game, but it is definitely something that has been talked about quite a bit. I would love for there to be a big production, AAA Dungeon Crawler Carl video game, but nothing has really happened with that front recently.
Any plans to re-release the books with the original covers, and how do you feel about the current covers?
I really like the current covers. When Ace bought the books, we knew that we were going to have to change the covers. First off, the self-published covers, if you ask a group of 100 people, you're going to get 50 of them say, I prefer the original covers, the more unhinged covers that are the same covers that are on Audible and on ebooks. And 50% will say, I like the bookstore covers. I like them both quite a bit. Luciano Flightus, who does the covers on the self-published, does an amazing job. We will always have those for the ebooks and the audiobooks. And the paperback that comes out short for a little bit, at least when the book comes out. And the Will Stahl ones that are the ones that you see in the bookstores will always have those. And they serve two very different purposes. People who are already in a lit RPG community see the original covers and they like them, they understand them, they're silly, they're stupid, they're weird, they fit the story pretty well, they fit the genre really, really well. But those covers don't really do so well for people who aren't lit RPG fans. But the covers that we have now, when we first started designing them, I said, I want a typography based cover because Dungeon Crawler Carl has lots of name recognition now. I want someone to be able to see it from across the floor of a bookstore. And I think the first one does that really, really well. And I've had at events, live events, where the people come in the signing and they say, I first saw this in a bookstore. I mean, the results speak for themselves, honestly, because we've sold quite a few of those hardcovers. So I like them both for very different reasons. The self-published ones will always have a special place in my heart, especially since I design them, but Luciano draws them and I do all the typography myself. And then Ace works with me really, really closely to do the other ones, but it's all their design. And I think they're both great.
Yeah. How did you come to work with Jeff Hayes, and were you a fan of audiobooks before yours were produced?
I've always been a fan of audiobooks. I used to go to the library and get those plastic clamshell ones that, they sound like those bakery containers when you open it, and they would have like 16 cassettes in them. And you'd listen to the story, and then suddenly cassette number 12 would like suck or would be or wouldn't be there. And I used to get like the books for the blind when they wouldn't have books. I've always been an audiobook fan. But for Dominion of Blades, a series before that, those are narrated by the amazing Andrea Parsono, who's one of my favorite narrators. And when those books came out, they were nominated for an award. And the Here Now Awards was a ceremony that was in Kansas City, Kansas, which is where Jeff is from. He was also nominated for an award, and they were part of the ceremony. And I met him there. Plus, the lit RPG community is pretty small, so it was like around 2018-ish. I met him, and we hung out and became friends. And when I had another book that came out after that called Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon, and he originally was going to do the original audiobook for that, but ended up getting purchased by Tantor. And so he didn't do the first run audiobook of that. He's since done it for his Sound Booth Theater. But so we'd already been talking. And when Carl was on Royal Road, the free web serial site that originally put it on, they have a podcast called Sound Booth Theater Live, and they did it, just a scene from it. It's the juicer scene from the first book. And you can still watch it. It's still on YouTube. And it's the first time they had read it. It was like a blind cold read, and they did a really good job with it. And right afterwards, Jeff was like, "Dude, I'm doing this book," and I said, "Yeah, you are," and that's how it's been ever since.
What books and games are you reading and playing right now?
I'm always reading books. I'm always playing games. I've been traveling a lot, so my books have been slightly slowing down. I reading Jade City by Fonda Lee. I'm going through that right now. It's amazing. I met Fonda at Dragonsteel, Brandon Sanderson's event, and she's like the coolest person in the world. I'm in awe. And I'm so happy that the books are so good. They're not what I expected. You know, it's like set in like the 1980s, and it's 1980s style technology, and it's about like Yakuza style gangsters, but with a really specific magic system. It's really cool. Game wise, I try not to get too sucked into games, but I made the mistake of getting the Oblivion remastered, and I've been logging quite a few hours in that recently.
What other book series are like your favorite book series, and have any of them had an inspirational impact on you for Dungeon Crawler, Carl?
I've been reading my whole life, so lots and lots and lots of books have formatted my I guess, who I am. Uh, my favorite author is a guy named Guy Gavriel Kay. He's a fantasy author, and he writes, his words are like magic. But I don't write anything like him at all, like not even close. It's not even like the same ball game. But I love him. Tigana is my favorite book. But I also love 80s horror. There's Robert R. McCammon. It's one of my favorite authors. He had a book, it's not really horror, but it's called Boy's Life. I really love. Swan Song is a book I really love. When I was a kid, I would go to the library on base because my dad was in the military, and I would read through all of the horror novels they had throughout the summer. And once I was finished with them, I would go through and read all the westerns. So a lot of Louis L'Amour stuff. And you could read two of those in a day. And that was formative for me, the westerns and the horror, and then the action adventure, like men's novels for the most part. And then I would finish them all, and then I would like get Jones in and be stuck reading Harlequin romances until they got new books in the library.
Um, so many fun questions. I'll hit you with some fun ones. What's your favorite voice from the immersion tunnel?
There's so many. I mean, if we're taking out Jeff Hayes in the so if you don't know, the immersion tunnel Sound Booth Theater does. Jeff Hayes does Dungeon Crawler Carl, obviously, and he does almost all the voices. People don't believe me when I say that, but the immersion tunnel is only on soundbooththeater.com, and it's an audio drama style redone, and it's a full voice cast. But Jeff still does several voices. He does Carl, he does Donut, and he does half of the AI. So there are several other people that do some of the other voices. There's a few added scenes too that I really, really like. My friend Justin Thomas James, who's a narrator, he does him and one of his friends, they do like a commentary, Shaquille O'Neal style commentary of the crawl that's added. My friend Ben Wolf actually wrote those scenes, but they're added, and the voices are amazing. Heath Miller, the guy that narrates He Fights with Monsters, does the video when he first meets Mordecai. There's a VHS cassette video that's like "Welcome to the Dungeon," and it's really funny and it's really well done. All of the voice actors do just such an amazing job, and there's so many of them. It's hard to recall who does what. There's also the audio immersion version of Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon, also on Samba Theater. And like Andrea Parsonell, who I mentioned earlier, does Banksy, the worm in that. And it's my favorite performance of hers.
We had someone ask, when is Jeff gonna narrate your fan fiction?
Man, if I could find it, I would love to have him do that. He just finished, I think he's done I wrote a book in 2013 called The Grinding, and that's now out of print. There was an audiobook, but that's when it comes off of Amazon, it has to go off of Audible. And that's completely out of print, but they're doing a like an immersion version of that that's also going to be only on Soundboard Theater. But I've already listened to some of it, and it's he does a fantastic job. But as for like Destro fan fiction, G.I. Joe, I don't know. Maybe I can talk Transformers into letting me write a comic one day, and then that we can get it like something official.
We did have someone ask, is your Transformer fan fiction available anywhere? But I'll take that a step further. If you could write a tie-in novel for Transformers, what would you write about?
I wish I had time. I would love to write tie-in novels. I've actually been approached to write tie-in novels in another IP, and I just don't have the time. But in the future, I would love to do G.I. Joe and Transformers stuff. That's probably be the first. If I could pick any comic IP, it would be those two.
So someone has already managed to get a van into the dungeon. Do you think anyone will ever get a boat in successfully?
I don't know if anyone would get a boat in because I don't think very many of the portals would have opened over water, because we've seen what happens when portals open water. In a later book of the series. But Louis was lucky to get his van in because it had no roof on it, and he drove it right in the dungeon.
What inspired the character of Gravy Boat?
We have Gravy Boat, aka Ferdinand, sitting right here, the orange cat. We hear about Ferdinand in the very first book, and we don't know who he is. But it was important for me to have for Donut to have a love interest that turned out to be like a complete asshole, and kind of almost a mirror of Carl's. And everyone who's ever met an orange cat knows, there's a joke that they all share one brain cell, and it's usually not the day that this particular orange cat has the brain cell. And I've always liked that. And it's true if you've ever met a male orange cat. So I'm very happy to have him in the story.
We've had several comments say, Gravy Boat crew rise up. Gravy Boat is a good boy. Gravy Boat Defense Squad.
We're not done with Gravy Boat yet. So
incredible. Why Fiona the hippopotamus? Why the dedication to a hippo?
So if you read the first book, the hardcover, it's dedicated to Fiona the hippo. Then I'm like, sorry, Mom. If you flip to the very end, I kind of explain it. I am a hippo aficionado. I am a big fan of all the hippos in the world. From Mudang, the pygmy hippo, to Fiona, to Henry, to all the other ones all around the world. But her story in particular is pretty interesting because she was born at the Cincinnati Zoo, completely underweight, and they thought she was going to die. And when it happened, everyone was like riveted to the story, and then she survived, and I thought that was pretty cool. So I've never visited her, though. I've always wanted to go to Cincinnati to do like the behind the scenes thing and like chuck a watermelon in her mouth or whatever. But maybe one day I'll get to
maybe one day.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of questions about the research that you did into writing these books. Did you do any research on tyranny? Any research on bombs was one of the questions we got. Any research on dungeons? What kind of research did you do?
Okay, so this is just between you and me, but I've done lots and lots and lots of research on bomb making and how to make bombs, how to make IEDs. I have a copy of the original Anarchist Cookbook, which don't ever use that because all those recipes are not correct. I have gone down some pretty deep rabbit holes in terms of revolutionary tactics. It's especially ones that are not revolutionaries who didn't have prior research, ones that they've just come up on themselves and learn how to make things with what they have available to them. And that's what Carl is fortunate in the dungeon, where he has like the unlimited inventory and not unlimited, but his access to magic, and there's so many cool things he can do, and he acts in ways that other revolutionaries have acted in the past. But in addition to that, I'm always going down rabbit holes. There's so many cool things. It's always when I'm writing a new achievement, because I don't think of those ahead of time. I just come up with them at the spur of the moment. And I think, what would be an appropriate subject for the AI to go on a rant about? And the Molly McGuire's, I lost a week learning about that whole story. I've said this before, the Queen's Corgis. I went and learned all the stories of all the corgis that the Queen had. Can't remember now how many there were, but there are a lot. Monkeys that have gone into space, all sorts of little things. With the squirrel brain, the ADHD sort of brain that I have, it's always dangerous whenever I'm doing like the Carl's loot boxes, because I end up falling down deep research holes. So those chapters always take a little bit longer.
Is there a favorite research hole that you've gone down? Or maybe one you didn't even wind up using?
There's lots that I don't wind up using. I write lots and lots of things that don't make it. There's some. There's a guy called Grimaldi who's only loosely related to the Grimaldi from the circus. Is a really interesting story. There's the story of somebody once found this really old hot dog, and there's a debate on whether it was like the first hot dog. I was reading about that. Then I went down a rabbit hole about the history of corn dogs, and then we ended up never using any of this stuff in the dungeon. There's, again, lots and lots of cool explosive stuff, handmade, homemade weapons, traps, lots of traps from different wars throughout history are really interesting. A lot of stuff about online style rebellions, which is kind of hard to explain until you see it. Like communities that rebel against their moderators in some ways and end up taking it over for themselves, and how well that works for them. We haven't yet seen any sort of that sort of thing yet in the dungeon, but we may.
Now, if you had to describe lit RPG to someone who had no idea what you were talking about, how would you break them into it?
So lit RPG stands for literary role-playing game, and I kind of don't like that term because it's very confusing, because people think they're like choose your own adventure style books, and they're not. They think they're games. They're not. What they are is, it's a style of fiction. It's not even a genre. It's a style of fiction that you apply to a type of story. It's usually 95% of the time it's their fantasy stories, but sometimes they can be sci-fi, where the rules of the world are governed like game rules. Best example, I always use it, but it's easy. A person is a level 1 warrior. He lives in a village. He knows he's a level 1 warrior. He can pop up a screen that says you are a level 1 warrior, and the village is being threatened by a level 10 monster. So he goes on an adventure and levels himself up, and he kills a monster. And it's like he's playing Dungeons and Dragons or a video game, and he knows that he's leveled up. He can see that he's level 2, that he can see that he's level 3. And then he finally gets strong enough to come back and kill the monster. That is a lit RPG. It usually has stat sheets, characters who are aware of what their stats and stat sheets are. And there have been a few books like that in the past, but it really exploded in like 2013, 14. A lot of the Russian translated RPGs came into popularity in book form. And then the Asian side, in Korea and Japan, they've had it as well, but it's more in like animes and like the books. And the American lit RPG, there's a guy named Aaron Kong who wrote a book called The Land. It wasn't the first, but it was one of the first ones to become really popular. And then there are several other books that followed it, like Awaken Online by Travis Bagwell. And then it just kind of exploded after that. And when I first wrote Dominion Blades was in 2017. There was a guy named Ramon that was doing the Lit RPG podcast, and he could review every single Lit RPG book that had come out that week. And it was usually like 4 or 5. And now it's like impossible for him to do it, because there are literally hundreds of them coming out a day now, because it's exploded in such popularity.
Can you name your 3 to 5 favorite fellow lit RPG authors that you want to shout out?
That is so dangerous. There are so many I think are amazing. Shirtaloon, who writes He Who Fights the Monsters. That one is really popular for a reason. I'm a big fan. He's sick right now, so get well, Travis. There's Honor Ray, who writes All the Skills. She's an amazing author. Doesn't get enough credit. There's one of the OGs is Dakota Kraut, wrote The Divine Dungeon. He gets a lot of crap because he writes so much. He's so prolific that people get mad when he's not prolific in the right direction. And I love him. He's one of the generally nicest guys. There's, if you've read book 6, there's a stripper in it called the author Steve Rowland, who's a troll. And he writes under, he's a real person, owes me money, which is why he's a troll in the book. That's a joke, maybe. He writes under SL Rowland. He's really good. Man, I can go on and on and on, and I feel like a dick for not saying all of them.
Can't name every single person
Yes.
ever. Well, what advice do you have for aspiring authors, and particularly people who are starting out in self-publishing?
Self-publishing is hard. And the reason why it's hard is because it's made of dreams. So people prey on them. And it is, you go into a self-publishing forum on Facebook and you say, hey, I want to learn about this. You are going to get inundated with people who are trying to scam you. And it is very difficult to understand. And then you also get inundated with people who are well-intended, but they're giving very, very terrible advice. And it's very difficult to know early on what is good advice, what is bad advice. Should I even be self-publishing? Is it ready for this to be published? And my biggest piece of advice is to wait. It's always okay to wait a little bit to publish your book. I know you want to get it out there, but it's really easy to make a mistake that kills your book. And the best way to do this is to know the world really well. Spend time on the forums, read self-published books, see what works, see what doesn't work, read in your own genre. That's super important. Know what your genre is, know what book formatting looks like, because when you're self-publishing, you have to do it all. And there's people that so-called hybrid publishers that are really just vanity presses that'll prey on you and sell you things you don't need, do a subpar job, take your rights without you even realizing it. And there's so many minefields out there that it's really easy to get caught up. So research, read. That's just on the self-publishing itself. When we talk about the book itself, the actual craft of writing, that's the most important part too. I personally think you shouldn't even think about publishing at all when you're writing your first book. You want it to be as well written as you can make it, and you should be focusing 100% on the craft, especially with your first book. The worst thing that can happen to anyone, I truly believe that, is they write their first book trying to write something in a genre that they don't want to write in, and it becomes successful. Because if that happens, it kind of forces you down a path that you're not going to be happy with. Write what you want to write. It's important. Because you'll be passionate about it, and it will make the book better.
Good answer.
It's a subject that you think about it.
Yeah. So with each level of the dungeon digging into video game themes like card game battles, D&D magic spells, and leveling up, if there was a cozy video game theme level of the dungeon, such as Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley, Animal Crossing, what would it be like?
I have actually, so I have a list of possible dungeon levels. I usually let my Patreon folks like vote on a little bit. And a cozy themed one, just like Stardew Valley, was an idea. I don't think I would end up doing this just because the conflict in it would be difficult to make compelling in a book form, especially in a book that's like known for its explosions and death and massive deaths. But the story would be, you have to build make a farm, and then you have to harvest so and so much in a certain amount of time. And I thought it was kind of cool, but it it's not gonna work out. But I have a list of books I want to write one day. And I do want to write the world's most violent cozy novel. So hopefully, hopefully that'll be, when Carl's done and Dominion of Blades is done, because I'll finish that too. I don't know if that question's out there, but I will write that book one day, assuming I don't get hit by a bus first or something.
Knock on wood. Do you have any plans for a spinoff of Dungeon Crawler Crawl?
I don't have any immediate plans of writing a novel in the Dungeon Crawler Carl world. We may see a story that's told concurrently with Carl coming pretty soon in the graphic novel format, but I don't know if it's my place to talk about that yet or not. And I could be just making this up, so who knows?
Yes. We've had a lot of questions asking for a Vindaloo recipe.
Vindaloo. So in the very first book, they meet the Babkas, and Carl asks, "Well, why don't you make me something?" And he makes Merg Vindaloo, chicken Vindaloo. I've never made it myself. I can't imagine I would ever do a good job of making any Indian food. I just like to eat it. I'm a huge Indian food fan. So that was the first meal in the dungeon. But if you're ever in like the Seattle area, I could recommend you some places.
We've had a lot of questions about merchandise from the special edition Kaiju Battle Field Surgeon to collectible figures, Princess Donut CD of songs. Insight you can share on any of these things.
There's a lot of bootleg merchandise out there. I'm sure I'll see some of you guys wearing bootleg shirts. And that's okay. Well, it's not okay for my lawyers, but I'm not on his head. The official Dungeon Crawler Crawl merch store is mattdinniman.threadless.com. And if you didn't get your shirt there, then it's not official. But we also, Samba Theater sells stuff. They have the cassettes that have the USB thing on them. Those are pretty cool. They also have special edition vinyls that you can only get at conventions. There's custom, if you've ever looked on my Facebook or my posts, I post a few pop figures. Those are custom made. Misty Figs, who's an amazing artist that makes those, and she gives them to me every once in a while. We have plans for some pretty cool merch coming in the near future. But again, a lot of this whole so-called empire is all me. I'm doing this all myself. So it's hard for me to get all the good stuff all at once. I hope that we can get some more designs in there. The designs that are there are pretty cool, I think, but there's lots and lots and lots of cool but unofficial stuff that's out there. And that's just a sign to me that how popular the store is becoming, that people want merch. And I understand that. I'm working my best trying to get more and more stuff. But again, it's mattdinniman.threadless.com is the official store.
We've had one person say, talk to me about gods. I'm curious as to how you came up with Diwata being able to hatch endless babies in the Butcher's Masquerade, but all of the gods are so dynamic.
If you've ever spent any time reading about myths, especially like creation myths and any pantheon, all of those stories are always batshit bonkers. They're insane. You have gods being born out of people's knees. You have gods sculpting goddesses out of clay and thinking they're hot. And we can go on, and it gets weirder from there. I've always been a fan of mythology and myths. And when I want to make gods in the dungeon, who aren't really gods, they are rich people who are paying for the right to play gods for the most part. It was important for me to make them wild and crazy and insane. There's a god named Midas in book 7, whom, if you haven't read it, then I won't explain who he is, but he's a little wild. His origin story is a little wild. And I love stuff like that. It's just going to get crazier and crazier from there. But a lot of these gods, like Diwata, are based on actual myths in the dungeon, and it's a plot point to the overarching story of Dungeon Crawler Crawl, because a lot of these different cultures and different planets have really relatable to each other creation myths, and maybe one day we'll know why that is, or maybe not.
Now, if you were at the Desperado Club, what would be your drink of choice?
I am a rum and Coke guy, like a Cubano. That's easily my favorite drink. I don't drink beer. Not a huge wine fan, but hard alcohol, yeah. Uh, that I've been getting into sake lately though, so that's pretty cool too.
Yeah. Okay, we've got time for just a few more questions. So, how much time do you spend reading other books and other authors, and has that amount changed as you've become more increasingly successful?
I think that's the most important part of being a writer is constant research. I am always reading books. I'm always reading two books at a time. If I can. I reading a book and then listening to an audiobook. And a lot of times I'm reading a book to blurb and I'm listening to an audiobook for fun or vice versa. Like I said, I'm going through the Jade City books by Fonda Lee, and that's on audio. And I just finished um, reading a book, a physical book before I left, and I didn't bring one with me. So, and I don't have room for one. So, and I don't have time because I've been falling asleep and the second I get into my hotel room. But I will always have something. I've been consuming books at a very, very rapid pace my entire life, and I don't see that slowing down no matter what happens.
We've already talked a little bit about a potential video game and et cetera, but have you any interest in a board game or a TTRPG?
I would love to talk about a TTRPG. I don't know if I can talk about any TTRPG stuff, but I would love for that to happen. Hopefully sometime soon.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
Have you ever had a wonderful idea for a book and then realized someone else wrote it years ago, and how do you pivot?
That's actually a really interesting question because Dungeon Crawler Carl, the first draft of it, it wasn't called Dungeon Crawler Carl, it wasn't a lit RPG. I first wrote that, started writing in around 2007-ish. And that book, I completed the whole book. And the book was started kind of similar to what is the fourth book in the series, The Fifth Floor. And when I was almost done with it, and it took me a while to write, I realized Stephen King had a book called Under the Dome that was almost identical in setup because the setup for that book is completely different. And it was so disheartening to me that I ended up shelving that entire book. I never even tried to sell it or show it to anybody. I still have it. It's even done. But it's sitting there in my computer and no one will ever see it. Now has too much of a setup similar to Carl's and the Stephen King book that I never will. But it was an important lesson because I lost a few years in the process, and it's important for writers to know that there's no unique ideas. If your story is really similar to someone else's, assuming you're not like literally copying their words, then it doesn't matter. Stories are from your own heart. There's only like, what do they say, like 5 plots in the world. I can't remember what it is, but that's okay. Just tell the story how you want to tell it, and if any plot similarities, then who cares?
So, as we get to the end of this chat, I will ask about the end of Dungeon Crawler Carl. Do you have an idea mapped out, and what's coming next? What's coming out next?
So I have no idea where it's going. I am working on book 8 right now. I'm pretty sure it's going to be about 10 books. I'm not 100% positive about that, but I'm pretty sure you can kind of see where the trajectory is going and how things are accelerating. And if you've read book 7, you can understand why I say that to a little bit. What's next? So there are several things in the pipeline. Book 8, of course, is my number one priority. There's a webtoon, which is like if you're familiar with webtoons, it's a vertical scrolling comic. That's been made. The first several episodes are done. I've seen them. They're pretty cool. That'll be releasing pretty soon on the webtoon platform, and that is just one for one with the book. It's a retelling of the first book. We may or may not have that aforementioned graphic novel that I talked about that's concurrent with Carl, but from a different crawler's perspective. that may be coming out relatively, the announcement for it may be coming out relatively soon. It still has to be made. There's the television series coming out. In addition to that, oh, book 7, the hardcover, if you're standing out there and you're holding book 6 right now, look how thick that thing is. So book 7 is going to be, 100 pages thicker. Sorry about that. That's coming out in September, the end of September. And then in February of 2026, we have Operation Bounce House coming. That is a standalone sci-fi novel. It's already written. I wrote it while I was finishing up This Inevitable Ruin. It is about settlers on a distant planetary colony who've been on a planet for years, and they finally built the transfer gate to get back to Earth. And the second it opens up, the Earth comes and they said, hey, you know what? We're evicting you from the planet. We're taking it back for ourselves. And so they have to fight back. But for the eviction, Earth hires a corporation to do it. And the corporation, instead of printing their own AI soldiers, they decide to gamify it. And they allow bored people on Earth to design their own war machines and to remotely pilot them. And in order to research this, I watched hours of Counter-Strike videos on YouTube and little kids swearing up a storm. And that's kind of the tone we're going for Operation Bounce House. And it's a pretty cool book.
But remind us the name and the date that's coming out of the next one.
The next Carl book is This Inevitable Ruin, September, whatever the last Tuesday in September is. It's that. Operation Bounce House, I believe, is February 10th. Both of those are up for pre-order now too. And you can walk into the store here. I don't know if you do pre-orders here. Do you do?
We do, yeah.
Yeah, then you can pre-order them both now. And yeah, I look forward to doing more signings and stuff.
Well, we are going to wrap this up so we can get you ready for the signing we're about to have happen here. But thank you for your time, and thank you to everyone who was watching with us tonight. And we will call that a wrap. Bye, everybody.
Bye. See you in a second.